Okay, welcome back, Pahrump. And tonight we're talking about the skinny on weight. If you missed the first half hour, we basically talked a little bit about what equals 1 pound in terms of caloric intake, and that is 3,500 calories. And then we talked briefly about what happens if you were to adjust your diet 10 calories up per day. You would gain basically 20 pounds in 20 years if that was your steady caloric intake, and taking that caloric content away would cause similar weight gain based on your active metabolism. And I used the example of a metabolic rate of 10 calories per pound, which is actually very slow. And then we were talking a little bit about different foods. We talked that fat definitely goes to fat, that protein actually has very low caloric input and caloric value, and that protein actually slows carbohydrate metabolism. And that if you were to actually eat some carbohydrates eating some protein before ingesting carbohydrates, you could actually slow down that. And that becomes very important because as we do gain weight, as we age, our body changes. We do lose muscle mass. And if we all remember back to when we were 15 and 16, we were very lean. We didn't have a lot of body fat on us. But unfortunately, as we gain age, we also gain fat, but we also lose muscle. And that shift causes us to actually start to gain weight at a faster rate. When you ingest calories, whatever they are, they have to go somewhere. And as they are absorbed into your body, we have fat tissues that are storage cells, or basically storage tanks for the food that we eat. Either we're burning that food off with high activity, or we're storing that food in the form of adipose tissue. And the product the interchange of that is that insulin is the factor that makes that happen. And we'll talk a little bit about more of that. And I want to remind everybody, there's a call-in line, 727-8750, and we are also on Facebook, Local Pahrump. Is that correct, Vern?
That is correct.
Okay. So if you do have a question and you're too shy to call in, you can always get on Facebook and post that question, and Vern is monitoring that particular site as we speak.
Yeah, I got a guy who basically had kind of a statement out there. It said, too bad they don't have a weight gain class. He'd like to learn more about that. It's been a battle for all his life.
Well, some people have pretty high metabolism. Some people also have malabsorptive disorders, where they basically cannot absorb some of the nutrients that they eat. So it would depend on where that particular factor is. There are people. One of the problems I see today, and this goes away from the talk that we're talking about, is that when do people feel full? Part of the problem is when you sit down at a meal, we basically, there are people out there that just get full. And as they get full with a very little amount of food, they stop eating. But there are some people that don't get full. And part of that is the foods that we eat. When I discussed earlier about high fructose corn syrup, there's a belief that that particular processed sugar tricks our mind not to be full. And that particular form of sweetener is in just about everything we eat. Also, I really want to talk about later about GMO. There are genetically modified organisms. Our food has been processed and changed. That means that we get tricked. The caloric content is different, and the way our body processes that is different. I actually have a caller. I guess it's Stephanie. So is that person on the line, Stephanie?
Go ahead, Stephanie.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Good
Dr.
evening.
Reiner. I would just like to thank you for taking so good a care for so many years of my adopted mom, Margie. You know her well. She's 92. And you told her a long time ago you can't keep her alive, but you have done a very, very good job. I appreciate it. She's the love of my life, and she's an inspiration to everyone. And Thank you very much. Do you take new Medicaid patients by any chance?
Oh yes, we're taking new patients all the time. So they flash my number at the bottom of the screen every once in a while, so you're free to call that and set up an appointment. And thank you for your support and those lovely comments. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you. I've known you for many, many years, and you're somebody that's really special.
Very much. Okay, so well, thanks for that call. That's always nice to hear when you do a good job. Sometimes you hear a lot about when you don't do a good job. So it's always nice to be appreciated. At any rate, back to that, it's just the idea of there are people that actually do get full, and there's a lot of study into that. There's a lot of dietary, the diet pills and things like that are coming out to try and trick our metabolism into telling us that we're full. But again, with that, it's the foods that we eat. And if we're eating high carbohydrate foods, we are basically ingesting a lot of sugar, and that sugar causes insulin to be secreted. I do have that slide up, and it does talk a little bit about that. So increasing weight causes a decrease in glucose processing. And what does that mean? It would seem the opposite of that. It means that as we gain weight, the fat in our body actually acts as a sponge for the insulin that we make. So what that means is the insulin can't finish its job efficiently, and it hangs around in our system even longer, and it takes more insulin to get the sugar out of our system into our fat stores. It's a little more complex than that, but suffice to say, high insulin levels have been linked to heart disease. They're certainly linked to increasing appetite. They're certainly linked to increasing blood pressure. Also, whether people don't know it, this hydrolyzed protein or Accent or that stuff that monosodium glutamate has been linked to being a very high insulin secretor. So therein lies why you go to a Chinese food restaurant and you're still hungry an hour later. And part of that is because if you check your stuff, then you do get the hydrolyzed protein. And so insulin, again, facilitates the transport of sugar into our tissues. If we have a muscle cell and that muscle cell burns the sugar, it basically more comes through the cell without the act of insulin. Imagine insulin is turning the spinning doors at the hotel, the revolving doors. And the faster those doors spin, the faster sugar is taken into the cell. And with that process, you can see that high circulating insulins drive a lot of sugar into our adipose tissue. And as those adipose cells get overrun with sugar, they start to secrete free fatty acids into our bloodstream. And the liver sees that and says, well, we're not hungry. I mean, how can we be hungry? We're starving. We have free fatty acids. And with free fatty acids, guess what? Our liver stores fat, our adipose stores fat, and we're still hungry. So this is where all the problem begins with carbohydrates. And there is an imaginary line in the sand. As we gain weight, we shift from becoming insulin sensitive to becoming insulin resistant. And that usually occurs around a BMI of around 30. That's when we get into the obese factor. That's when you start to see the risk for heart disease increase. That's when you start to see all of those diseases that are related to obesity and high carbohydrate diets start to take into it. And as a matter of fact, some of the data seems to suggest that high carbohydrate diets are the main factor in heart disease and are the main factor in hypertension, not only because they cause us to gain weight, but because how they change the way our lipids and the way our cholesterol is made. And when we're eating natural cholesterol, in fact, one of the people say, well, it's a saturated fat in our diet. Well, that's true. That causes cholesterol, but really sugar causes more cholesterol problems than the fat that we eat. So again, as we age, we lose muscle mass, we become less active, we burn less calories. It makes it harder to burn calories. We can develop some diseases. We can develop other things. So we have to reduce our carbohydrate intake. And this makes the basis of the diet that I wanted to talk about. We have to eliminate the root vegetables. What are root vegetables? Root vegetables have amylose. Amylose is a very, very compacted starch. And when you ingest amylose, it gets digested by the amylase in your saliva. So what does that mean? You take a bite of carrot, it's a root vegetable. A potato is a root vegetable. And as we eat these root vegetables, they don't taste sweet, but the amount of sugar that gets deposited in our intestinal tract is humongous. It's just like one of those little, sponges that is dried down that you add water to it and it expands. Well, that's exactly what carrots are. That's exactly what root vegetables are. Have you ever seen people just snacking on those little snack carrots? I mean, they're ingesting an incredible amount of sugar. Now, when you're a baby and you eat carrots, you need it because you're growing. But when you're an adult, you can get your beta-carotene in the form of tomatoes, and they don't have as high the caloric intake of carrots. And eliminate bread. Vern was on there, he said, how do I eliminate bread? Well, it's very difficult. Bread is a very big staple in our diet. And I love it. Everybody loves it. You go to a restaurant and they serve you bread and you just pick out, then your meal comes and you're stuffed. You wonder why and if you ever gone to a restaurant and hear your blood pressure go up, it's because as you eat, your blood pressure does increase when you're eating because of this high insulin levels that happen with the foods that we eat. The only bread I suggest that people should eat is the Ezekiel bread. Ezekiel bread is frozen. You can buy it in the frozen food section, but it is a high protein based food. It's a natural grain bread. It's a 4-9 grain bread. And it does not elevate your sugar like regular bread does. So the nice thing about it is you put it in a freezer and you only take it out when you need it. You don't feel bad because you wasted a whole loaf of bread. So we're gonna go to break and then we're gonna come back and we're gonna pick up this, for the last few minutes, this low amylose diet and low carbohydrate diet. And thank you very much for tuning in tonight.